Breaking: Tanzania airport under siege. Top leader flees as Gen Z protests erupt. Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of the InspirAfrica official. I'm Nakash. What a turbulent week it has been across the African continent. From economic summits to political upheavals, the news cycle has been relentless. But today, we must focus on a story that is still unfolding, still claiming lives, still shrouded in the darkness of an internet blackout. Picture this: the streets of Dar es Salaam, a city of over 7 million souls, erupting in flames. Young people, Tanzania's Generation Z, pouring into the streets not with celebration, but with fury. Their voices rising in a chant that echoes through the chaos. We want our country back. What drives a generation to risk everything? What transforms Election Day from a celebration of democracy into a battlefield? When the smoke clears and the internet returns, what will the world discover has happened in the shadows of this communications blackout? Imagine waking up to find your country has gone dark. No internet. No social media. No way to tell the world what you're witnessing. Then imagine hearing the sounds outside your window. Not fireworks of celebration, but gunfire. Not cheers of victory, but screams of terror. How many have fallen? The opposition claims 700 dead. 700. The United Nations says 10. The government? They claim 0. Not a single death. Not one excessive use of force. Who do you believe when information itself becomes a weapon? When hospitals are too terrified to confirm their death tolls? When foreign journalists are banned from witnessing the truth? And when a president wins an election where her only opponents are behind bars or barred from the ballot entirely? Can we even call it an election at all? The world is watching Tanzania tonight. But Tanzania cannot watch itself. The question that haunts us all: what happens when democracy dies in darkness? The crisis came to a head on Wednesday, October 29, 2025, when Tanzania held what many are calling its most controversial election since the return to multi-party democracy in 1995. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, Tanzania's first female president who rose to power in 2021 after the sudden death of her predecessor John Magufuli, faced virtually no opposition on the ballot. But this wasn't because she was universally beloved. It was because her main challengers had been systematically eliminated. In April 2025, the Independent National Electoral Commission took the unprecedented step of disqualifying the entire Chadema party, Tanzania's main opposition, for refusing to sign an electoral code of conduct. Days before this disqualification, Chadema's leader, Tundu Lissu, had been arrested at a rally where he called for electoral reforms. He now faces trial for treason, a charge that carries the death penalty. The second major opposition candidate, Lohagam Paina from the ACT Wazalendo party, was barred from the mainland presidential race on what critics call technicalities, following an objection from the Attorney General. President Hassan ultimately faced just 16 candidates from smaller parties who barely campaigned. But the systematic suppression began long before Election Day. Human Rights Watch documented at least 10 instances of politically motivated assault, harassment, abduction, and torture in the months leading up to October 29th. The United Nations, in a June briefing, tallied more than 200 disappearances since 2019. Amnesty International described it as a wave of terror, including enforced disappearance and torture, and extrajudicial killings of opposition figures and activists. The abductions intensified dramatically in the final days before the vote. Among those taken was Niffer, a popular social media influencer, accused of promoting protests with what were described as jokey videos about selling face masks. According to specialist publication Africa Intelligence, much of this crackdown was overseen by an informal task force of police and intelligence services managing election security. A task force reportedly led by President Hassan's son, Abdul Halim Hafid Amir. Then came Wednesday. As Tanzanians went to the polls, something unprecedented happened. What began as small, scattered protests in Dar es Salaam, Mbeya, Tunduma, Tanga, Mwanza, and other cities exploded into full-scale unrest. Protesters, predominantly young people, took to the streets singing, "We want our country back." They tore down campaign posters of President Hassan. They targeted polling stations, police vehicles, and businesses connected to the ruling Chama Cha Mapinduzi party. Security forces responded with tear gas and, according to multiple reports, live ammunition. As the violence escalated throughout Wednesday afternoon and evening, the government imposed a nationwide internet blackout and a curfew. Foreign journalists, already largely banned from covering the mainland election, found themselves cut off from sources on the ground. By Thursday morning, Tanzania had gone dark. The internet remained shut down. State television continued broadcasting election results showing Hassan's inevitable victory. But on the streets, the protests continued, and the death toll, disputed, horrific, unverified, began to climb. The conflicting narratives about what has happened in Tanzania reveal a chasm between government claims and opposition reports that is as wide as the internet blackout is impenetrable. On Friday afternoon, Tanzania's Foreign Minister Mahmoud Thabit Kombo sat for an interview with Al Jazeera and was asked directly about reports of hundreds killed. His response was unequivocal. Currently, no excessive force has been used. I've not seen these 700 anywhere. There's no number until now of any protesters killed. When pressed further about the opposition's claims, Kombo continued, "The national electricity supply utilities have been burned," he said, emphasizing property damage. He acknowledged pockets of violence and vandalism in various areas against government properties, including offices and vehicles, but maintained the government has no official figures on any protesters killed. The opposition tells a dramatically different story. John Katoka, spokesman for the Chadema party, spoke to AFP on Friday with details that are difficult to comprehend. As we speak, the figure for deaths in Dar es Salaam is around 350 and for Mwanza it is 200 plus. Added to figures from other places around the country, the overall figure is around 700. He paused, then added a chilling qualifier. The death toll could be much higher. Killings could be happening during the nighttime curfew. International organizations are caught somewhere in between these two extremes, trying to verify information in a blackout. Sif Magengo, spokesperson for the UN Human Rights Office, told a Geneva briefing, "We are alarmed by the deaths and injuries that have occurred in the ongoing election-related protests in Tanzania. Credible reports we have received indicate that at least 10 people were killed in Dar es Salaam, Shinyanga and Morogoro as the security forces used firearms and tear gas to disperse protesters." Amnesty International's regional director for East and Southern Africa, Tigray, Haguda, provided an assessment that fell between the UN's conservative estimate and the opposition's claims. On Wednesday, immediately after the first day of violence, he stated, "Reports that one general member of the public and one police officer have been killed during Election Day protests across Tanzania are deeply disturbing. The risk of further escalation is high." By Friday, Amnesty had revised its figures dramatically upward, telling media outlets it had information suggesting at least 100 people had been killed. Then there are the voices that cannot speak, or are too terrified to do so. AFP reported attempting to contact multiple hospitals and health clinics for confirmation of casualties. Every single one, the news agency reported, was too afraid to talk directly. The only high-ranking military official to make a public statement was Army Chief Jacob John Kunda, who released a statement late Thursday. His message was blunt and uncompromising. He called the protesters criminals and said the military would work with other security agencies to contain the situation. On the ground, the picture that emerges from those willing to speak, anonymously, always anonymously, is one of pervasive fear. One 70-year-old man told reporters, "There has never been a credible election since 1995, referring to Tanzania's first multi-party vote. When asked why he wouldn't give his name, another person explained the calculus of speaking out. "We are afraid of speaking because they might come to our houses and pick us up." A security source in Dar es Salaam, speaking to AFP on condition of anonymity, provided an assessment closer to the opposition's claims. Deaths were in the hundreds, they said, perhaps 500 dead, maybe 700 to 800 in the whole country. A diplomatic source confirmed to the same news agency that the unrest continued into the night on Wednesday despite the curfew imposed by police, suggesting the violence was far more sustained than official statements indicated. In Zanzibar, the semi-autonomous archipelago where the opposition ACT Wazalendo party was allowed to contest the local election, a spokesman for Hassan's ruling party offered a justification for the continued internet shutdown. Hamis Mbeto told reporters, The government knows why they have shut the internet. There are people who have tried creating tension in Dar es Salaam, and they have destroyed a lot of things. But the opposition in Zanzibar had its own grievances. After the ruling party was declared winner with 78.8% of the vote, ACT Wazalendo rejected the results entirely. Their statement was damning. They have robbed the people of Zanzibar of their voice. The only solution to deliver justice is through a fresh election. A senior party official from ACT Wazalendo provided specific allegations. Ballot boxes had been stuffed, people were allowed to vote multiple times without ID, and their election observers had been kicked out of counting rooms. President Hassan herself has remained conspicuously silent. As of Friday afternoon, she had made no public comment about the unrest, the deaths, or the accusations against her government. The silence speaks volumes. To understand how Tanzania arrived at this crisis point, we must look at the arc of Samia Suluhu Hassan's presidency. A journey that began with hope and has descended into what human rights groups now call state terror. When Hassan was elevated from vice president to president in March 2021 following the sudden death of John Magufuli, there was genuine optimism. She was Tanzania's first female president, and early in her tenure, she appeared to be charting a different course. She eased some restrictions on opposition parties and the media. International human rights groups were cautiously optimistic. But analysts say Hassan faced significant internal pressures. She confronted opposition from parts of the military and from allies of her iron-fisted predecessor, Magufuli. According to political observers, she sought an emphatic electoral victory to cement her position and silence these critics within her own party. The methods she employed to secure that victory, however, have drawn international condemnation. Namatham Sanka Masikompaka, Human Rights Watch's researcher for Southern Africa, warned in September that Tanzania's October elections were at great risk. She urged, the authorities need to stop muzzling dissenting voices and the media and instead engage in meaningful reforms to ensure free, fair, and credible elections. That warning went unheeded. One particularly controversial aspect of the government's approach has been the role allegedly played by the president's son, Abdul Halim Hafid Amir. Multiple sources, including the specialist publication Africa Intelligence, have identified him as heading an informal task force coordinating election security through police and intelligence services. Much of the public anger in the protests has been directed specifically at him, with demonstrators accusing him of orchestrating the wave of pre-election abductions and the violent crackdown on protesters. The broader context is equally troubling. Tanzania's October 2nd, 025 election is part of a disturbing pattern across Africa this month. Elections in Ivory Coast and Cameroon have also stirred deep-seated citizen anger as longtime leaders have sought to cling to power through increasingly authoritarian means. But what makes Tanzania's situation particularly alarming is the information blackout. By cutting internet access and imposing a communications shutdown, the government has created an environment where the truth becomes almost impossible to establish. Sif Magango of the UN Human Rights Office specifically addressed this tactic. A nationwide curfew is in place, and access to the internet appears to have been widely restricted since the October 29th general election, without any official reasons being given, he said, adding that such curtailment of communication will only further undermine public trust in the electoral process. The death toll discrepancy, ranging from the government's claim of 0 to the opposition's claim of 700, illustrates the fundamental problem. Without independent journalists on the ground, without internet access to verify claims through photos and videos, without hospital officials willing to speak publicly, the international community is left trying to piece together the truth from fragments. What is clear is that Tanzania's democratic institutions have been systematically dismantled. An election where the main opposition leader faces the death penalty for treason, where the main opposition party is banned entirely, where the second largest opposition candidate is disqualified on technicalities. Such an election violates every meaningful definition of free and fair democratic process. The question now is what comes next. The protests have entered their third day despite the curfew, despite the military deployment, despite the internet blackout. Young Tanzanians, part of a generation that has grown up connected to the global digital community, find themselves cut off and under siege. Tanzanians in the diaspora have been attempting to maintain pressure through daily discussions on X Spaces, analyzing the protests and organizing financial support for demonstrators. The government has postponed the reopening of colleges and universities, which were set to reopen on Monday, a tacit acknowledgement that student activism poses a continuing threat. Meanwhile, state television continues to broadcast election results. The ruling CCM party marches toward its inevitable victory declaration. And the world watches, as much as it can watch a country that has deliberately gone dark, wondering when the lights will come back on, and what horrors they will reveal. Thank you for watching this edition of InspirAfrica Official. The situation in Tanzania remains fluid and dangerous as of this recording. The internet blackout continues. The protests continue. And people continue to die, though exactly how many may not be known for days, weeks, or perhaps ever. This story is far from over. We'll be monitoring developments closely and will bring you updates as information becomes available and verifiable. I want to hear from you in the comments below. What are your thoughts on what's happening in Tanzania? How can the international community respond to election crises that unfold behind information blackouts? What obligations do we have to our fellow Africans when their own governments cut them off from the world? These are not easy questions, but they're necessary ones. Until tomorrow, when we'll return with more stories from across our beautiful, complex, turbulent continent, this is Nakash saying, stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop asking questions. Good day, and may Tanzania find peace.